You can't even afford a car? So shut your damn mouth, my father sneered across the wedding table. Laughter erupted sharp and cruel, slicing through me like broken glass. I sat there, hands trembling under the linen, when the low roar of blades rolled over the lawn. A helicopter descended, wind-whipping gowns and flowers into chaos. My glass never shook. I looked up steady and smiled. My ride's here. My father froze. My mother fainted. And for the first time in my life, I felt untouchable. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say, listening in the comments, or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel. It may seem small, but it means the world to me. It tells me my voice matters, that my pain wasn't in vain. My name is Serafina, and this is the story of how the family who tried to humiliate me lost everything instead. The welder hissed and spit a hard white arc when my phone rattled across the workbench. I flipped my mask up, heat still prickling my cheeks, and squinted at the screen. Deputy Ramirez. I answered with my glove half on. His voice was clipped, and wind-chapped searchlights on the ridge a kid found wandering near the old mine road, hypothermic, scared. Name's Theo, he said. Says his aunt is Quinn. The hinge I'd been welding glowed dull orange as I slapped the breaker down. Metal ticked in the cold like a clock running out. I moved on instinct. Heavy jacket leather gloves, a folding knife, burn salve into the side pocket. I snapped the light off, slid the shop door shut, twisted the deadbolt. The last spark fell and fizzled on the concrete. One ember, one promise. I wasn't letting it die. Ice filmed the county road like glass. The old Ford fishtailed as the wind punched at the cab. The radio coughed out weather alerts, 40-mile-an-hour gusts, wind chill in the single digits. A deer flashed through my headlights and I jerked, before catching myself loosening my grip the way I'd teach a kid someday. Don't fight the slide. Ride it out. The mine's blast horns were long silent, but memory put a faraway thud in the dark, and it carried my brother's name with it. Silas, like the mountains, still remembered him, whether I wanted to or not. By the time I reached the ranger station, my fingers ached, and the heater was losing the fight. Ramirez met me on the porch, a blanket bunched in his arms. Inside the wool, Theo's face was chalky and pinched lips tinged blue. I knelt, so we were level. Hey, bud, I said, voice steady like a shoreline. I'm Quinn. You're safe with me now. His eyes flicked to my face and held not long but long enough. The volunteer nurse slid a thermometer under his tongue and Ramirez pushed a clipboard toward me. Temporary custody. I signed where he tapped. Theo's voice when it came was a paper cut. Mom said I wasn't worth keeping. The room tipped for half a second. I set my hand on the blanket, not touching skin, a steadying weight anyway. She's wrong, I told him, slow and sure. You're worth keeping. You're mine to keep. The truck ride back felt shorter. I carried him inside like a bundle of brittle sticks. The stove coughed sparks and settled into a low, even burn. Cocoa steamed in a chipped mug. I checked his fingers and toes, pinking up rubbed circulation into his hands, while he watched the flame like he was memorizing it. I pulled Silas's blanket from the cedar chest, faded flannel, the ghost of motor oil and pine soap, and tucked it under Theo's chin. The shoes on his feet were split at the toes and worn thin at the heels. I loosened the laces and set the pair carefully by the hearth. Not trash. Evidence. A record of exactly how far he'd walked to get here. My phone buzzed. Cassia. Hope you found him. I need time to figure things out. The words tasted like tin. I deleted the message. No more time for her kind of figuring. At 3:07 a.m., I called Ellis Vaughn, the lawyer who'd handled Silas's will. Voicemail picked up. It's Quinn, I said. I have Theo. I'm filing for emergency guardianship at first light. I hung up and wrote the time in a new notebook, 0307, start logging everything. The first entry. A rail to hold on to. Theo slept in the rocker, listing toward the stove's warmth, the blanket bunched under his chin. I dozed upright on the couch, boots still on. At dawn, I drove into town for milk, and a thin extra blanket, the diner's bell giving a tired little ring when I pushed the door open. Dolly's smelled like coffee and biscuits, and a lifetime of conversations. Hazel spotted me, her mouth already set in that mountain town half smile that means I know things. Rough night? She asked. I nodded. She leaned in. Saw Cassia, late Quinn. Dressed up. Car I don't recognize. Some fellow driving. Her voice was soft, like she wished she didn't have to say it. I kept mine flat. Don't let Theo hear any of that. Hazel's eyes warmed. She slipped a pack of cookies into the paper bag without looking at me. For the little one, she said. On the house. Back at the farmhouse, I propped the door with my hip groceries rustling. Theo stirred when the cold snuck in, and I tucked him tighter, stoked the fire. I reached for a fresh legal pad in the kitchen drawer, and my fingers brushed paper and envelope buried under receipts. My name in a hand I knew as well as my own Silas. The breath went tight in my chest. I hadn't remembered him ever handing me anything. The seal was unbroken. I rested my thumb on it, felt the ridge, and then slid the envelope back and shut the drawer. First I'd see Ellis, then the envelope, one ember at a time. I checked on Theo again. He blinked at me, small and wary, but his color was better. We're okay. I told him like a promise I could weld into something solid. We're okay now. And because I knew better than to let the mountain make me a liar, I sat back down at the table and wrote, "We're okay," under the 0307 entry. Then I underlined it twice. Ellis's office sat above the barber shop where old men still argued about ball games and strip jobs. The hallway smelled like wood polish and paper that had waited too long. Ellis didn't waste my time. He listened to my account of the storm of the ranger station of Theo's shoes by the stove, then printed the petition for emergency guardianship and slid it across the desk. My signature looked darker than usual, like it knew the weight it was taking on. "You should see this," he said, turning to the safe. From the metal belly he pulled a folder labeled Silas Appendix B, and my brother's name made the room tilt just a degree. Ellis spread the documents like a dealer who knew the game was rigged in our favor. "The trust is funded at $900,000, he said, tapping the numbers, insurance included. All disbursements for Theo's care only. Every expense logged monthly. And this," his finger moved to a paragraph that bristled with legalese, "if the mother neglects or abandons the child, any claim she makes is frozen until the court rules." The relief didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like bolts, tightening structure clicking into place, something that could bear weight. "CPS has Ramirez's report," Ellis went on. "Assuming they confirm abandonment, you're the priority for permanent guardianship." Silas wrote it that way. I set my palm on the desk to keep from floating up. He thought this far ahead. Ellis's mouth curved, almost a smile. "Your brother was a hardhead, Quinn. But he took care of business." He reached back into the safe and handed me a smaller envelope. Thick paper, my name in Silas's urgent slant. "Quinn, open if you must." The seal cracked under my thumb. Inside a single page. "If anything happens, they'll call it an accident. Don't believe what they say. Follow the money." Paperclipped to the letter was a photocopied receipt from a subcontractor tied to the mine. A big number. A vague line item, special assistance, dated days before the cave-in that took Silas. The room cooled around my shoulders. "Ellis?" I said, my voice lower than I meant it to be. "What is this?" He didn't answer at first. He just took the paper, scanned it, and slid it back into the envelope. "It's evidence," he said finally. "Which means we keep it sealed metaphorically and we keep our heads down. First, protect Theo. Then, if we need to, we follow the money." We mapped out a system like we were building scaffolding. Ellis gave me a sample ledger format. I'd scan every receipt, every school fee, every coat and pair of boots, time-stamped and named so even a judge could follow my footsteps. He told me to open a separate account for Theo so my welding business never touched his funds. Discipline is how you win cases you should already win, he said. I wrote it down. In the afternoon light, I sat on the rug by the stove so Theo didn't have to look up. Here's the deal, I said. You're with me now. I'm responsible for you until you're big enough to choose your own road. He worried a fraying corner of the blanket eyes on his hands. Do I have to go back with Mom? The words were so small they almost didn't make it out of his mouth. No, I said, and I let the word fill the room. No one is putting you back in the storm. He leaned into me like a tired bird into windbreak. The weight of him was nothing and everything. When he napped, I set up the scanner on my workbench and ran my first test milk receipt, blanket receipt, time-stamped and filed. Theo, expenses 2024, 12, 15, 12, hours 07, milk. PDF. The naming calmed me. Order as a kind of prayer. Outside the ridge kept its snow and the sky moved toward pewter. Before I left Ellis's office, he'd said one more thing, almost like he didn't want to. After Silas's funeral, he told me eyes on the window instead of my face. Someone from your family asked me about Appendix B. I had asked who. He had not answered. Now with the scanner humming, the thought returned and sat in the room with me like a second shadow. I made one more entry in the logbook, open separate account done. Start monthly ledger done. Keep envelope sealed? Yes. Then under it I wrote Silas's line, follow the money. I underlined money twice because I knew Blackwater and I knew the mine, and I knew what people called accidents when they were tired of saying fault. Toward evening, I brewed tea for myself and warmed the last of the cocoa for Theo. He woke, hair stuck to his forehead, and took the mug with both hands. We listened to the stove tick and the wind fuss around the eaves. You hear that? I asked. That's the mountain talking. He looked toward the window like he could see the ridge answering back. What's it saying? He asked. That we've got work to do, I said. And we're the ones to do it. When I tucked him in, I carried Silas's blanket to my room and read the letter again under the small lamp, just the first line, no more. They'll call it an accident. I set it back in its envelope and slid it into a folder with the trust papers, then into the gun safe where I kept things I couldn't afford to lose. The combination turned under my fingers with a familiar click, like a door shutting on a cold night. As the house quieted, Ellis's unfinished answer floated up once more, someone from your family. Not Cassia, she wasn't family to him, not on paper. Which meant blood. Which meant someone who shared the last name and the history, and the kind of pride that could bend a man into a shape he never admitted out loud. I blew out the lamp, lay down, and watched the ceiling go dark. The envelope in the safe was a coal, banked but hot. The ridge would hold its snow. The river would keep moving under the ice. Morning would come with CPS and forms and more logging to do. And when it did, I'd be ready to keep the truck steady, loosened hands, eyes forward, just like I'd promised myself at 1:17 a.m. on a mountain road that tried to throw me. The scanner hummed late into the night, its pale light flicking across my workshop wall. Each slip of paper milk blanket cocoa slid into digital order. Discipline was a shield, Ellis had said, and I needed shields more than sleep. Theo's breathing carried from the rocker in the corner, shallow but even. He clutched Silas's blanket like he had stitched himself into its fabric. Watching him, I thought of Silas as a kid, scabby knees, the same restless eyes. He'd grown up too quick. And maybe he'd known Theo would have to too. The receipt in the sealed envelope gnawed at me. Special assistance. Subcontractor. My brother had left breadcrumbs, but they weren't scattered. They were buried. I opened the drawer again, slid out the envelope, and stared at his handwriting. Quinn, open, if you must. I already had. Now I wished I hadn't. In the morning, CPS came clipboard tired eyes, the smell of motel shampoo. A woman named Janine Keller walked through my house, peered into corners, nodded at the firewood stacked neat by the stove. Theo shadowed me, clutching my sleeve. He'll need stability, Janine said. Routine. And school soon as the road's clear. I kept my voice level. He'll get all of it. She asked about Cassia. I showed her the text message, the timestamp, the deletion log from my phone. Evidence logged in my notebook. Janine's pen scratched across her form. It's abandonment, she said almost under her breath. But as she closed her folder, she added, You should know your sister called us this morning. She's not letting this go. Theo's grip tightened. I kept my own voice steady. Neither am I. That night when Theo was asleep, I drove down to the mine office, padlocked since the collapse. Snow muffled my boots. Through the glass, I could see the wall of safety posters still curling in the corners. I pressed the receipt from Silas's envelope against the glass lining, dates and numbers with a faded notice tacked on the corkboard. Same handwriting. Same subcontractor. Behind me, the wind carried a sound, a truck engine. I ducked into the shadow of the wall as headlights swept past, slow, deliberate. The truck idled a beat too long before rolling on. My throat dried. Nobody drove this road without reason. I drove home with my lights off for half the way. When I slipped the truck into the barn, I felt the envelope in my pocket hot as if it had a pulse. The mountain was whispering louder now. Accidents, receipts, and someone else watching the same trail I was about to follow. Theo was coloring at the table the next morning, a lopsided truck under a yellow sun, when Cassia's car crunched up the drive. My stomach cinched. She hadn't driven that heap since the summer. She stepped out in fur-lined boots, sunglasses too big for her face, hair glossy in a way that didn't belong to Blackwater winters. Theo stiffened, shoulders folding in. Quinn, she called, voice sugary brittle. I've come to see my son. I met her halfway down the walk, arms crossed against the cold. You left him in a snowstorm. Her mouth twisted. I needed a break. You wouldn't understand. Always playing the martyr. Inside, Theo pushed his drawing under the ledger out of sight. Cassia's gaze slid over the house, the stacked firewood, the cocoa mugs, the blanket folded on the chair. Her lips pressed tight, envy souring her face. I talked to CPS, she said. They'll see you're overstepping. He's mine, Quinn. I handed her a copy of the trust appendix Ellis had prepared. Her eyes scanned the clause, freezing her claims in case of neglect. Her jaw tightened. Silas hated lawyers, she spat. He'd never write this. Silas loved Theo, I said. He wrote it for him. Her laugh cracked like ice. You think you're so righteous? Welding steel, living alone with ghosts. You don't know what I know. She leaned in, lowered her voice. Silas didn't die clean. There were deals. Dangerous ones. If you dig too deep, you'll end up just like him. The words landed sharp. My hand went cold on the paper still in hers. She shoved it back at me and stalked out, slamming the door so hard the stove rattled. Theo's eyes were wide when I turned. Is she taking me back? No, I said firm. But my mind replayed her words. You don't know what I know. That night while Theo slept, I opened Silas's envelope again and spread the receipt on the table. Numbers and dates stared back. I added them to my logbook, underlined twice. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up county records, contracts, payments, a pattern starting to form faint as tracks under snow. A knock startled me. Midnight. I slipped the receipt into the safe before opening the door. Hazel stood there, breath clouding in the dark. Truck came through town slow, asking about you, she whispered. Not locals. Be careful, Quinn. I nodded, thanked her, shut the door. My reflection in the glass looked like someone I didn't fully know anymore, jaw-set, eyes too awake. Upstairs, Theo stirred in his sleep. I stood at the window watching the ridge, the mine's silhouette jagged against the moon. The ledger was filling the shadows, lengthening, and Cassia's warning gnawed at me. If you dig too deep? But I couldn't stop now. Silas had left me the trail, and trails weren't meant to be ignored. The ledger grew heavier each night, though its pages were thin. Dates, receipts, whispers half caught at the diner, they all stacked like steel plates. Too much weight for one person, but I carried it anyway. On Tuesday, I took Theo into town for school enrollment. His hand felt small in mine, his breath fogging quick against the January air. The elementary's flag whipped in the wind, stars blurred in frost. Inside, the secretary smiled too brightly when I gave our names. "We already have notes here," she said, glancing at a file. "From his mother." My gut tightened, and she hesitated. "Concerns about your suitability," she said. "Welding shop fumes, long hours, possible negligence." Theo shrank beside me. I clenched my jaw but kept my voice even. "You'll have CPS's report soon. It clears me. Put him in class." She nodded, uneasy, and led Theo away. I stood in the hallway, his backpack bouncing once before disappearing into the classroom. For the first time in days, he let go of my sleeve. On the way back to the truck, Hazel flagged me down outside the diner. "Your sister's been here talking." Planting doubts. "She's telling people you can't handle him." "I can handle him," I said. Hazel touched my arm. "I know. But Cassia's not playing fair." That night, I sorted through county records again. One name kept circling back: North Point Contracting. Subcontract safety inspections, payouts labeled special assistance. The same company tied to the receipt Silas had left me. The snow started again near midnight. I went out to split wood, let the rhythm clear my head. That's when I saw it: tire tracks across my drive that weren't mine. Fresh, shallow, not yet filled by falling snow. Someone had come up the mountain, turned around and left, watching. I checked the locks twice that night. Still, sleep never settled. Every creak of the timbers felt like footsteps. And when I finally drifted off, I dreamed of Silas, his face hidden behind a welding mask, voice muffled, "Don't let them bury it, Quinn." By Friday, Janine from CPS was back. She looked more tired than before, paperwork sagging under her arm. "Your sister filed a formal challenge," she said, sitting at my kitchen table. "She's claiming you manipulated the trust and are using Theo for financial gain." My stomach burned. "You saw the house. You saw him. He's fed, clothed, safe." "I did," Janine said, her eyes softening. "But challenges mean hearings. You'll need airtight documentation." I slid the ledger across the table. Receipts, notes, timestamps. She flipped through slowly, her brows rising. "You're more organized than half the guardians I've seen." "It's the only way to keep the noise out," I muttered. After she left, Theo asked, "Why does Mom hate you so much?" I crouched down level with him. "She doesn't hate me. She's just lost. And when people are lost, they say things that aren't true." He studied me, serious as a judge. "But you won't let them take me?" "Never," I said, though the word tasted like iron. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the ridge, I drove to Ellis's office. He'd pulled more files on North Point. "Look here," he said, pointing at a ledger entry. "Payments to a shell company the week before Silas's accident. Amounts too high for safety compliance. Someone was moving money." My chest tightened. "And Silas found out." "Looks that way." Ellis shut the file. "If Cassia's mixed up with them?" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. On the drive home, a truck pulled out behind me on the county road. Headlights too close, engine too loud. I pressed the gas, tires skidding on the ice. For 2 miles, the truck shadowed me, high beams cutting into my mirrors. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it turned off onto a logging spur and vanished. By the time I pulled into the barn, my hands were trembling. I sat there in the dark cab, breath clouding the silence heavy. Inside, Theo had fallen asleep at the table, crayons scattered around a half-drawn picture of a house with smoke curling from the chimney. My house. Our house. I tucked him in, but when I returned to the kitchen, I left the lights burning. The mountain was closing in, and Cassia's challenge was only one front. The other was older, deeper buried in the mine with Silas. And now, whoever circled my drive in the snow, they knew I was digging. The courthouse in Ashford smelled of varnish and stale coffee. Snow blew sideways outside, rattling against the high windows like handfuls of gravel. Inside, Cassia sat in her red coat, hair pinned too neatly, her eyes locked on me as though daring me to slip. Theo sat with Janine in the back, small legs swinging, trying to look braver than he felt. I caught his glance once, gave him the barest nod, and turned forward. The judge entered, robe sweeping the floor, voice crisp. This is the matter of temporary guardianship and associated trust. Cassia's lawyer rose first, words smooth and poisonous. Your Honor, my client asserts that her sister is exploiting her child's trust fund for personal benefit. Welding shop income is insufficient and motive is clear. I kept my hands still on the table, fingers laced to hide the tremor. Ellis stood next. Your Honor, the records are all here. Every receipt, every purchase. My client has maintained meticulous logs, separate accounts, full transparency. The judge peered at the binder Ellis laid down. Pages thick with dates, stamps, my handwriting. He flipped a few, brows lifting. Thorough. Cassia's lawyer shifted tactics. Beyond finances, suitability. Welding fumes, dangerous equipment, remote location, hardly fit for a child. I rose before Ellis could stop me. Your Honor, I built that shop myself, every bolt and weld. I keep it locked. I keep records. I keep Theo fed and safe. That's more than he got the night his mother left him in a storm. Gasps rippled through the benches. Cassia's jaw set, eyes flashing. The judge rapped his gavel. Order. Ellis leaned in, whispered steady. The rest blurred, arguments, counter-arguments, legalese. But then, when it seemed balanced on a knife edge, Ellis slid a sealed envelope onto the bench. This, Your Honor, is from Silas Black, written weeks before his death. It specifies his wishes if abandonment occurred. My heart kicked hard. The judge slit the seal, read silently. When he looked up, the room had gone so still I could hear Theo's foot tapping the wooden pew. Pending further review, guardianship remains with Quinn Blaze. The trust shall remain under her care, subject to oversight. Relief flooded me, hot and dizzying. Cassia hissed something I couldn't hear, her nails biting into her palm. Outside, the storm hadn't let up. Snow cut across the steps, wind biting my face. Theo clutched my coat. Does that mean I stay? I crouched, pulled him close. It means you're safe. For now. But the look Cassia gave me as she descended the courthouse steps promised the fight wasn't over. If anything, it had only just begun. The following week, I barely left the farm. Between school runs, wood chopping, and ledger updates, I checked locks twice, sometimes 3 times. But the unease didn't fade. On Wednesday, Ellis called. I found something. We met in his office, the radiator clanking like tired bones. He slid a stack of photocopies across the desk. North Point Contracting. See this? He tapped a payment line, $75,000, funneled through a shell called Ridgetop Supply. Dates 3 days before Silas's accident. My throat dried. It's a payoff. Ellis nodded grimly. And Cassia's name shows up here, signed as a witness on a separate disbursement form. Could be nothing. Could be everything. The room tilted for a moment. My sister tied to the same money that might have buried Silas. I drove home on autopilot, hands cold on the wheel. When I pulled into the drive, the mailbox flag was up. Inside sat an unmarked envelope. No address, just my name, scrawled in block letters. Inside, a single photograph. Silas, hard hat tilted back, laughing with 2 men in North Point jackets. On the back, someone had written, "He asked the wrong questions." I dropped into the porch chair, photo trembling in my grip. The wind moaned through the eaves, and in that sound I swore I heard Silas's voice again. Don't let them bury it. That night I told Theo stories of Silas by the fire. His bad singing, his stubbornness, the way he always burned pancakes. Theo listened, eyes wide, the photograph hidden under a pile of firewood where he couldn't see it. But when Theo finally slept, I pulled it back out. Shadows danced across Silas's grin in the photo. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about why Silas never came home from the mine, and if Cassia's tied to it, then she wasn't just trying to take Theo, she was trying to cover tracks. I logged the photograph, time-stamped and scanned. The ledger grew another page thicker, the ink sinking dark. For the first time since the storm, I admitted what I'd known deep down: to protect Theo, I had to uncover everything. Even if it meant going toe-to-toe with my own blood. Ashford felt smaller once you knew which walls were rotten. I could see it now in every handshake, every glance too quick to hold. Folks at Dolly's stopped whispering when I walked in, but the silence itself was a kind of confession. Ellis arranged a second hearing this time, not just about custody, it was about the trust's integrity, and by extension Silas's death. He warned me the room would be heavy. He wasn't wrong. Cassia entered with her lawyer chin high, but the gloss had worn thin. Dark smudges under her eyes betrayed restless nights. She looked at me as though daring me to ruin her, yet beneath the glare was something weaker: fear. The hearing opened with the trust audit. Ellis laid out receipts, time-stamped files, the photo of Silas with the contractors. North Point's payout is suspiciously close to the date of the so-called accident, he said, voice calm but cutting. Cassia's lawyer objected, claimed irrelevance. The judge allowed it in provisionally. Then Ellis dropped the last card, Cassia's signature on the witness line. My stomach twisted. Cassia bolted upright. That doesn't prove anything. I didn't know what they were doing. They just... She stopped words, choking her. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Blaze, are you admitting you signed documents related to financial transactions with North Point prior to your brother-in-law's death? Her silence was louder than a confession. The gavel cracked. Proceedings recessed. I found myself in the hallway, Theo's small hand pressed into mine. Is Aunt Cassia in trouble? I bent down, meeting his wide, uncertain eyes. She made choices that hurt people, buddy. Sometimes the truth takes time to show itself, but it always does. He nodded like he wanted to believe me, but his hand clutched tighter. That evening, Ellis called. Word is, North Point's cutting Cassia loose. They won't burn for her. I stepped onto the porch, the mountains standing black against a restless sky. For the first time, I felt the scale of it all: the trust, the accident, the family unraveling. But I also felt something else. Resolve. The next day, when court resumed, Cassia didn't fight. Her lawyer filed a motion to withdraw. She sat there, head bowed, as the judge formalized guardianship to me, trust secured, mother's rights suspended indefinitely. The gavel struck final this time. Theo's voice was a whisper at my side. So, I get to stay. I turned to him, heart too full for words. Instead, I just nodded and pulled him close. His cheek pressed warm against my coat. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Yet even in relief, a shadow lingered. Silas's words from the letter echoed. It won't look like what they say. The payout trail wasn't finished. Cassia was just one piece. But for Theo's sake, I knew I'd follow it even into the dark. Spring didn't arrive all at once in Ashford. It crept in with dripping eaves, mud tracks across the barn floor, the first brave shoots of green between patches of dirty snow. Theo grew taller in those months, his laugh steadier, his eyes brighter. He started sketching again at the kitchen table, drawings of trucks, mountains, sometimes a stick figure holding his hand. At night, when the fire burned low, I'd catch him glancing at Silas's photo on the mantel. He never asked again about his mom. Maybe he didn't need to. One Saturday, we drove out to the ridge where Silas used to take us hiking. Theo scrambled ahead, boots. Two big arms spread like wings. The wind was sharp, but the sky stretched open and blue, no storm clouds in sight. He turned back, breathless. This is what you meant, right? Keeping your hands loose on the wheel. I laughed, blinking against the sting in my eyes. Exactly that. We sat together on a boulder, the valley yawning below. I told him stories about Silas's stubborn streak, how he once welded through a snowstorm just to finish a gate, how he always believed family meant showing up even when it was hard. Theo leaned against me quiet. I think he'd be proud of you. The words landed soft but heavy, a weight I hadn't realized I needed to carry. That night, after tucking Theo in, I pulled out the old envelope again, the one with Silas's warning and the receipt copies. The evidence was still there waiting. But instead of fear, I felt patience. The truth would keep until the right moment. I placed the envelope in the fireproof box, locked it, and slid it back onto the shelf. Walking through the darkened house, I paused at the workshop door. The scent of iron and oil lingered. I flipped the light on sparks still etched in my memory from that first night. This was where it had started me alone, sparks flying, the storm raging. But I wasn't alone anymore. I closed the workshop door and went upstairs, where Theo's steady breathing filled the hall. For the first time since the night of the storm, I felt it deep down. The wheel was steady, my grip loose but sure, and the road ahead, whatever it brought, was ours to take together. Morning light seeped over the horizon, painting the ridge gold. A new day, a new life. Not perfect, not certain, but real. And that was enough.